Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the MIDDVantage series, Exploring Careers in the Green Economy. My name is Courtney Gant, and I am in the class of 2022 at Middlebury College. At Middlebury, I'm a conservation biology major and a French minor. Today's episode is titled Sustainability, a view from inside a corporation, and I'm pleased to be joined by Tiffani Jarnigan, Middlebury Institute of International Studies, class of 2014, who is currently a manager of ESG process and innovation at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Tiffani.
Thank you for having me.
So this series explores a number of different professional areas in the green economy, from policymakers and renewable energy analysts to sustainability and ESG experts. So Tiffani, can you tell us a little bit more about Hewlett Packard and what the company is currently doing in terms of sustainability?
Sure thing. So HPE is half of what used to be Hewlett Packard Company, which split into two different companies in 2015. So for those of you thinking, oh, I love my HP laptop, that's not my company. However, if you run a server or a data center or a supercomputer, that would be the ticket. So HP Company, which dates back to the 30s, if you guys can believe that, has an extremely long legacy of sustainability. Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett built it into the company as a main priority right out the gate. They were both conservationists in their time, and they really wanted it to be embedded in the genetic makeup of the company rather than an add-on program. So in that sense, they were really pioneers in the space, and HPE continues that legacy with our current CEO, Antonio Neri's leadership, who really champions HPE's purpose, which is to change the way people live and work. And so that has a lot to do with taking our technology and really applying it to global scale issues that impact our people on the planet. So in addition to all of the normal things that you might find in corporate sustainability, there's also this really fun piece of the applied technology of our solutions and what that means for global issues.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And it's so cool to hear that the company has really been focusing on sustainability kind of from the start. So that's really inspiring. And can you just share a little bit more about your current role at Hewlett Packard? What are your main responsibilities and what entities do you interact with on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So it's kind of a timely question because I actually just received a promotion and a little bit of a lateral shift in my work. So historically, when I joined HPE 3 years ago, I was managing stakeholder engagements, which includes all of the nitty-gritty ratings and rankings, CDP, DJSI, all of the alphabet soup that goes along with the 100 most insert superlative here. So really championing our strategy and how we wanted to focus our responses to those ratings, because there's a really strong accountability there for corporations to not only disclose, but also demonstrate how they're being impactful and being beholden to their shareholders in that way. And then in addition to that, we have 3 technologists that work on the sustainability benefits of our technology, our products and solutions that we bring to our customers. And I used to run strategy and operations for them. So really thinking about who are the industries that we have the most ability to impact, what it is that they're looking for, and how do we really bring that conversation to bear with the stakeholders on the other end. So I'm making a little bit of a transition out of that into more process and innovation, which has to do with innovation around our products and services. So not just looking at the products and services that we currently have, but thinking about it in a more future-looking lens. How do we take what we're currently selling and drive further sustainability into those products so that we can even more deeply impact our customers and help them achieve their own sustainability goals. So what that ends up looking like is I work with a lot of technical people who work on the nuts and bolts of products, or they work on how to bring it to market or product design. And I challenge them to think about what sustainability would look like for that. And then in ideal cases, help them map out what that might look like. And then the process part of it too is also thinking about integrity and governance of data. So a large part of sustainability right now is reporting on what your company does, the environmental metrics like carbon emissions, social metrics like human capital development, your investment in your own people. You know, how does this impact the supply chain? And then how does it also impact the communities in which we function? And so we disclose a lot of data around that. And part of what's going to become my role is maintaining data governance policy within our team to make sure that we are really reporting data with the best integrity, and making sure that it's got robust methodology and assurance behind it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for some of our viewers who might not know about some of the acronyms you were talking about earlier, like what exactly are those and what is the impact of those ratings on corporations in terms of, are there investors that are interested in those, sustainability ratings, or, who exactly are looking at those ratings, those numbers?
It's a really good question. So at its genesis, it was kind of the first mechanisms for companies to be held accountable for what they were saying. So, right, like, how do we prevent companies from simply greenwashing? And so, one of the first ones, at least to my own knowledge, I would welcome any challenges and people who are better suited to the history of ratings and rankings. But I think, this really started to take on a life of its own in the early 2010 period, between 2010 2020, when CDP came on the scene. And CDP used to be known as the Carbon Disclosure Project. They've rebranded to just be CDP. But essentially, that was a mechanism by which companies could voluntarily disclose their carbon emissions of essentially their operations. And now what's become a more robust scope 3 accounting, which accounts for everything else: logistics, business travel, stuff in your supply chain, emissions from the use of your products. So if you sell a piece of electronics like us, when it's plugged into the wall and it's spinning up and drawing electricity for its life. So for a server, that's 3 to 5 years. What are the emissions associated with the power draw that comes from that? So for us, like, what are the associated emissions with our phone every time we plug that in? And so CDP was kind of at the forefront. And then that one is pretty specific to carbon. They also have one for forests and for water and different things like that, but there's about what feels like a million other ones, and some of them have very targeted focuses, like CDP, where, for example, Civic 50 is more around corporate philanthropy and volunteering, and how your corporation shows up as like what they call a corporate citizen. And then there are ones that are much more broad and paint a picture across governance, economics, social, and environmental. And so I'd say the most robust of that group is what's called the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which has just recently been repurchased by S&P Global, which is an investor company. And so investors are using these ratings and rankings in order to determine a company's performance in broad sustainability, and then in very specific areas and ways, as a way to hold them accountable.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you for kind of expounding on that topic. And then I'm just curious, with all of with all the sustainability projects and initiatives that Hewlett Packard does, do you have a favorite project or program that you have worked on, or something that you think would be really cool to bring to the company right now?
I think one of the coolest things that I've actually worked on is maybe a little bit top secret right now. But I've been working on a project with the intellectual property team, which sits in the legal and administrative organization, like my group does, where we've been looking. This started probably about a year and a half ago, actually, because the head of IP is a return Peace Corps volunteer like me. And so I met him at a picnic, and he and I just got to chatting. And so I ended up emailing him, and I wanted to know, of all of the patents that we filed over the life of the company, which actually ended up being only back to 2000, but 20 years is sufficient. How many of those patents could be considered technology that contributes to the green economy or the low carbon economy, or could be considered clean revenue or green revenue, whatever it is, the term that you want to think about? How many of the patents that we have filed and own currently could be considered in that vein? And so we went through a little bit of what was a tedious exercise to pull out all the keywords and map and try to think about what those patents would look like. And as it turned out, it was about 20%, which isn't bad. I'd say 1 in 5 is pretty good. And so then they contacted me after participating in the COVID patent pledge, which a bunch of companies got together at the beginning of COVID, and they essentially said, any technology that you need that we hold a patent for is yours if it's in the name of pursuing research or a solution to what is going on in this global pandemic. And that was kind of the first time I think a bunch of companies had stood together in such a transparent and open way, putting the public good before the good of their own companies. And so a few months after that, they were really pleased with their progress and their contribution in that way. So they contacted me, and I can't really talk about it now, but I can always follow up with a link. And they said, hey, we've got an idea for something else. And so it's something that we're going to announce on Earth Day. And I think one of the reasons why I like this project in particular is because it's an unlikely marriage between two teams at a company that don't typically work together. So it's been though it's extra work, it's been really great.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm sure we'll all be on the edge of our seats waiting to hear about what that might be and what's coming for Earth Day. But then this is kind of a segue away from that a little bit. But what do you find is the most challenging aspect of working at your company or working in the green economy in sustainability? Do you ever come up against resistance to change in terms of technology or supply chains, or do people seem ready to embrace sustainability at your company?
Oh, it's such a good question. And I would say that my answer is not unique to working at HPE or working at a company. I faced the same challenges, just with different players and different content when it came to the work that I did in the Peace Corps. But there's always resistance, there's always naysayers. I'd say, generally speaking, sustainability from an employee standpoint, most people in their jobs, regardless of what they do and what they touch and what their day-to-day looks like, they want to contribute to something that creates a better planet. I mean, nobody is against that. However, the way that that's manifested, or the way that it's actually carried out, can be quite challenging. And there's often a lot of misconceptions that need to be overcome around how much something like that costs. So I'd say one of the primary things that people push back at me about whenever we're having, for example, conversations about embedding sustainability into innovation of products is usually around cost. And so if I can't present to them a clear return on investment or a very strong business case, the conversation is usually dead in the water, and not from a lack of desire, but from a perceived lack of appetite from the higher ups who make the business decisions.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I guess, showing a good business case is kind of at the core of a good sustainability, like division, or just like a good sustainability project. So that's really interesting. And kind of going off of that, what do you see as the future of sustainability at Hewlett Packard? Do you find that there's, places for opportunity, or, departments that you would look forward to working with? You kind of spoke about some of the ones that you've been working with recently, but are there others that you think would be really cool opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, that's another one of the things that's really fun about sustainability, is that it touches so many different parts of the company. So, one of the things that we talk about in the Office of Legal and Administrative Affairs is around connecting the dots. So it's about, like, how do you work with business partners across the company, and how do you see things from a much more macro level? How do you step out of your day job in order to kind of bridge these gaps across the company? And, my team and I laugh because that's our entire job. Our whole job is to see across the company and kind of think strategically about where the gaps are, where the opportunities are, connecting the dots between maybe business partners that are, like I said before, unlikely neighbors or unlikely marriages. And so, I mean, though there's plenty of really frustrating things, I don't mean to paint it with rosy glasses. There's a lot of really rewarding work that happens, so long as you're willing to play the long game. There's not many short-term wins, or low-hanging fruit, or anything like that. You really kind of have to dig in and use that good altruistic spirit that you likely have if you're pursuing a career in this path, in order to kind of propel you forward and remind you that when it seems like nothing's going your way, that if you just kind of keep at it, eventually things will coalesce.
Yeah, that's definitely really interesting for sure. And thank you so much for these insights. As someone who is aspiring to work in sustainability, I'm curious about your own experience from campus to career. So I saw that you went to Rutgers University for your undergraduate and double majored in Russian language and literature and political science. Then you decided to go back to grad school at Middlebury's Institute of International Studies at Monterey, where you got your master's in international environmental policy. So first, could you just tell us a little bit more about your time in college and how your undergraduate experience prepared you for this career?
Yeah, not exactly a straight line, huh? I loved my time in college. I loved studying Russian. I loved studying literature. Um, Sorry, my dog. I also really loved poli sci, especially the more philosophical aspects of it. But I left undergraduate with this kind of sinking feeling of I have debt, number one. Number two, I don't actually know how to do anything. So, that realization was a little bit harsh, especially if we think back to when I graduated from college was 2009, which was a humongous recession. And so thankfully I was able to work at my auntie's company, which is an organic fruit and vegetable distribution company in San Francisco. So I had kind of a soft place to land, but I definitely left college with the impression that I needed to pursue graduate work that would actually prepare me for a career. And I don't think that that's actually that unique of an issue coming out of undergrad. I think, especially those who pursue liberal arts degrees like I did, you come out being able to write a mean paper and maybe have some great pontification on some really naughty topics, but naughty with a K, not with an NAU. But I wanted some skills, and so that's what ultimately led me to the Monterey Institute. That, and of course my love of language. So pretty unusual to find a school where you can do graduate level language work in addition to your curriculum. It was a very short list when I was pursuing that, and so somebody who had already dedicated about a decade to studying Russian, I wasn't about to give up that easy. But the other thing that really attracted me to the Middlebury program at Monterey was the fact that there were a lot of classes and workshops from which I would learn tangible skills immediately applicable to a business scenario. So things like how to write a grant, how to do project management with frameworks that are used by big non-governmental organizations like CARE or USAID. How do you function within those companies? How do you write a brief? I mean, that's a pretty good one. And then of course there were some additional quantitative classes that I really thought would help escalate my ability to survive in the business world, let's say. And I do have to say that all of those things panned out. So very grateful for my time there.
Yeah, definitely. And you spoke a little bit earlier about your time in the Peace Corps, and I was just wondering if that played a role in kind of where you've ended up now, or if there were other courses or internships that you were involved in that really kind of helped steer your career into the green economy.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, interestingly enough, one of the most beneficial workshop slash certificate programs that I did while I was at the Middlebury Institute in Monterey was the Development Practicum Management Institute, I think is what it's called, DPMI. I love acronyms. That one was probably the most impactful one that I could directly apply my skills to in the Peace Corps, which again, I did things a little bit differently. People tend to do their undergraduate, go into Peace Corps, and then come back and study their master's. I finished my master's coursework and then I went into the Peace Corps. But that better prepared me to manage what ended up being a pretty phenomenally large project for which I had no subject matter expertise. So that was implementing a water system, the design, construction of a 3 community water system for about 120 families, without a hydrology or engineering degree. So I really say that it was my ability to kind of manage the project and keep my eye on the ball and all the moving pieces and organize myself in a way that I could build capacity within the community while pushing everything else forward, keeping an eye on funding, bringing in the experts who could help train me to do the quant type GPS and surveying that was needed in order for them to build a design for me remote. And so it's interesting to me in looking back that somebody who has no water expertise can fully execute on a project like that, because the expertise is not the fundamental part. The fundamental part is organizing all of the moving pieces.
Yeah, right, definitely. And it's cool that you were able to get that experience at Middlebury, at Monterey, because I think that a lot of students now are thinking about possibly going to graduate school at Monterey. So I think that's really cool to hear about some of the programs and projects that are kind of going on there. And kind of just to finish up this segment, how do you see your career evolving from here? Would you like to stay in the corporate sustainability world, or are there other opportunities in the green economy that you think are exciting?
It's a good question. I'm really excited for the prospect of kind of my new work remit, although it's pretty significant. And maybe I might be losing a little bit of sleep over the amount of work that I have to do. But at the same time, it's super exhilarating. And I like the idea of being able to further embed sustainability into our products. I don't know if I want to be in corporate forever. I guess we'll see. I've kind of had this really baseless dream ever since I was an undergraduate that ultimately I'd like to work for the UN somehow. So I don't know, maybe that's on the horizon. If anything can be taken from the path I've already walked in order to get here, is that you really have no idea where you're going to end up. But so long as you're pursuing things that are in line with kind of your values and what excites you, then, sky's the limit. So, I mean, if you had asked me 4 years ago if I saw myself working for a big corporation pursuing ESG process and innovation, I don't know that I necessarily would have said yes.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I think UN is probably a dream for a lot of people, and especially with your skills in Russian, I'm sure that would be a cool opportunity. But thank you for sharing your story. I know that many students are excited about the role of sustainability and ESG in the private sector and opportunities in this field. And I'm just curious, for students that are interested in sustainability, how would you recommend comparing different organizations' sustainability or ESG departments and programs?
Yeah, another good question. And I know you and I talked about this last week. So I'm going to parrot the same thing I said last week, which is that if you want to do sustainability work, don't just study sustainability. Study lots of things. Study business. Think about what's my background in financial. Do I know basic accounting? Do I know how to manage a budget? Do I know how to use Excel? Challenge yourself to learn pivot tables. Kind of make sure that what you're bringing to the table isn't just subject knowledge in sustainability, because let me tell you, it changes and it shifts, and that's something that you can learn on the job. And my boss unfortunately had just moved on to another job at AWS, but if you asked him the primary reason why he took me on board, even though I had zero sustainability expertise other than my master's degree, which at that point was already 6 years old, he took me on because of my business acumen, because I had worked in sales, I had worked in purchasing, I had stood up business intelligence programs and knew the basics of what software development looked like. And what for him was important was my ability to then translate those skills on his team, right? And leverage those skills to help further other people's work on the team, further the team's remit, and be a part of a bigger machine, So I would really challenge you to think outside the box and think about other things that you find enjoyable and find passions that align well with sustainability, or even if you don't know yet that they align with sustainability, I guarantee you they probably do. And so don't be super narrow in what you study, and just know that the only thing you bring to the table is not just your background knowledge in, carbon accounting or, I don't know, forest conservation. Like, you bring a lot of other skills to the table. So don't be afraid to shout those out too.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think a lot of people are really trying to focus more on data and data management here at Middlebury. That's definitely like a growing subject matter, and a lot of classes are being taught. So I think that's really important. And I'm just curious, if someone were to compare, different companies' sustainability programs and was trying to pick an environment that they want to go work in. Would you say that it matters that some companies are more committed and have more effective sustainability programs than others? And do you have any advice around that?
Depends on what you're up for. So if you want a challenge and you are really, you're really good at countering people's arguments and changing people's minds, and you want to have a big impact, go work for a company that's maybe got the appetite, but not the fundamentals yet, right? So I'd say, generally speaking, buy-in from the leadership is really important. It's very hard to push a sustainability agenda if the people at the top are not on board. So like thinking about your executive committee, the CEO, and perhaps even the board itself. If they've got general buy-in for sustainability, it's all about what your preferences are. So Hewlett Packard Enterprise is considered a leader in the space. That doesn't mean that we are not without our challenges. There are other companies that are just light years ahead of us, right? Microsoft, they want to remove all of their historical emissions going back to 1970. I mean, we can't compete with programs like that. They've got millions and millions of dollars that they're spending on this. I mean, Elon Musk just pledged via Twitter, I don't know, a couple weeks ago that he was going to throw a couple $1 million at the first person who thinks about carbon sequestration technology. And I thought it was kind of funny. One of the top responses was, $1 million to the person who invented forests. Mic drop. But, I'd say it's all about where you think you'll fit best. And that's not going to look the same for everybody.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And for people who might be curious about the green economy and not sure about sustainability or, other trajectories, where do you see some of the greatest job prospects kind of in this field?
Gosh, I don't know. I guess it depends on what you want to do. I just witnessed this amazing talk from this woman who is an entrepreneur and really in the innovation space around technology. And, I would say that her company fits into the green economy because when she was in Harvard at business school, she invented a device that was essentially a soccer ball that as the kids kicked it around, it created charge. And so an hour of charge would give 4 hours of light. Like, that's a really cool space to be if you're into innovation and more grassroots level development. Comparing that with corporate, that maybe the impact is much greater because the scale is enormous. I mean, HPE has 60,000 employees across, I think, something like 65 different countries. And so the scale of impact is so much greater when you think about a corporate. But then I also really loved the company that I came from prior to HPE, which is a 140-person company, but it's run by 4 queer women, and sustainability is so embedded in the company that it's embedded in every decision that every person throughout the company makes without even needing to have a sustainability team, which is kind of the ultimate sustainability when it's completely disaggregated. So I don't know that there's one spot where I think we're going to make the most progress or where the most exciting work will be. It kind of depends if you want to be international or if you want to be domestic. So I'd say, draw on your dream board what your objectives are. Do you want to have a family? Do you want to live internationally? Do you want to use that language that you're studying at Middlebury? I mean, it really depends on what you want to do and where you want to go.
Yeah, definitely. And just as we wrap up, given your experience and what you know now, are there any final thoughts or advice that you have for current students on how to best prepare ourselves for entry points into the current field?
Yeah, data is a good one. I'm tempted to say be authentic and be true to yourself. Those things are important, but I think data is also really important. So make sure that you know how to use Excel, make sure you know how to do a pivot table and maybe a couple of visualizations here and there. Get the basics down.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much, Tiffani, again, for your engagement with us and helping students to prepare for their career destinations.
It's been my pleasure. Good luck.
So this concludes this episode within the series, Exploring Careers in the Green Economy. In closing, I want to encourage viewers to tune in to get career perspectives and advice from a number of professionals and a broad variety of organizations in our other episodes in this series. I also want to encourage you to tune into the other MIDDVantage series, which can be accessed through the Events and Programs tab on the CCI website. Thank you again for watching.